The night my father asked me to hand over my inheritance to my bully stepbrother, the one who made my childhood hell. I smiled, because I'd already taken something from him he could never get back. Now let me tell you how it all begun, but before we continue, please hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss more jaw-dropping confessions every day. Your support keeps this channel alive. Back to our story. At the dinner table, the air was thick with the scent of my stepmother's overcooked roast, but all I could taste was the bitterness of my father's words. We sat across from each other at the long dining table, its polished mahogany surface reflecting the golden chandelier above. He looked almost regal at the head of the table, except for the guiltless expression on his face, the same one he wore every time he chose Jason over me. My stepbrother wasn't here tonight, but I didn't need him to be. Jason's presence had haunted every corner of this house since the day my father married his mother. His voice was in the creak of the stairs, in the hollow laughter that still echoed through the hallways, in the scars, emotional and otherwise, he left on me. "Elena," my father began, folding his hands like he was about to deliver some holy decree. "Your stepbrother has fallen on hard times. I think it would be best if you gave him your share of the inheritance. It's the right thing to do for family." Family, the word landed like a slap. My mind flashed to the 13-year-old version of myself, crouched in the dirt as Jason towered over me, his friends laughing while he pushed me down again and again. I remembered the time he took a pair of scissors to my hair the night before picture day, the day he locked me out in the rain for an hour, the months he spent spreading lies that turned my friends into strangers. And now my father, my blood, wanted me to give him the last thing my mother left me. I set my fork down with slow precision. "You want me to give my inheritance to Jason?" My voice didn't shake. I made sure of that. "Yes," my father said firmly. "Your mother would have wanted you to help him. He's family, Elena. He needs this more than you do." I tilted my head, studying him like he was a puzzle missing too many pieces. "What happened to him?" He sighed as if the details were unimportant. "Bad investments. The market turned on him. He's lost almost everything. This could be his fresh start." I almost laughed. Jason losing almost everything was the sweetest thing I'd heard in years, but the fact my father expected me to save him, that was the punchline. "You know," I said slowly, "Jason's always been very good at taking things that don't belong to him." A flicker of irritation crossed my father's face. "Don't start digging up the past. I'm talking about now. This is your chance to do the right thing. The right thing." The way he said it, you'd think I'd stolen bread from a starving child, but I didn't argue. I didn't roll my eyes or slam my hand on the table. I just smiled, because what my father didn't know, what Jason could never guess, was that I had already taken something from him. And not just money, not just a deal. Something deeper. Something permanent. I remembered the night it started. Jason was still riding high on his string of small business wins, most of which were built on intimidation and under-the-table deals. He bragged about the people he'd crushed to get there, as if cruelty were a skill to be admired. But arrogance blinds people, and Jason was about to trip over the web I'd been spinning for months. It began with a quiet friendship, me and a woman named Marissa. She worked in Jason's office. She wasn't just an assistant, she was the assistant. She knew the passwords, the files, the whispers. And more importantly, she hated Jason almost as much as I did. Marissa didn't need much convincing. She'd seen him ruin careers, cheat on partners, and manipulate investors. All she needed was someone willing to light the match. So I gave her the matches and the gasoline. Back at the table, my father was watching me carefully. "So you'll do it?" he asked. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him lean forward, impatient. Then I nodded once. "If that's what you want, Dad, I'll do it." His shoulders relaxed, as if the matter were settled. He reached for his wine glass, probably already picturing himself telling Jason the good news. But in my head, I wasn't thinking about generosity or sacrifice. I was thinking about the moment a few weeks ago when I'd slipped a flash drive into my purse. one Marissa had handed me with a grim smile. It contained everything, every shady deal, every offshore account, every fake invoice Jason had ever signed, enough to bury him financially and criminally. And the best part? I'd already used it. By the time my father finished his drink, Jason's accounts were frozen. His business licenses were under review, and half his partners had backed out of deals, afraid to go down with him. All that was left now was to let him believe he still had a fighting chance until I took that from him too. I left that dinner with my father's "thank you" echoing in my ears like the punchline to a cruel joke. He had no idea that agreeing to his request didn't cost me a thing, because Jason's fall had already begun months ago. All I had to do now was guide it and make sure the landing crushed him completely. The first step was letting Jason believe I was on his side. That meant answering his calls, smiling at his fake concern, and nodding when he pretended to care about my life. Every "how have you been, sis?" made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to play along. Revenge requires patience. Jason had always underestimated me. As a girl, that had been my weakness. As a woman, it was my weapon. He still thought of me as the timid kid who flinched when he raised his voice. That made it easier to walk right into his world without him suspecting a thing. 2 days after that dinner, I met him at a sleek cafe downtown. He wore his usual uniform, designer suit, overconfident smirk. Even as his empire was rotting from the inside, he still projected arrogance. That was Jason's fatal flaw. He could never smell the smoke until the flames were licking his heels. "Elena," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I hear Dad talk to you." I stirred my coffee slowly. He did. I'm considering it. He grinned like he'd already won. "Good, because this money could really help me rebuild. I've had some setbacks." I bit back a smile. Setbacks, that's what he called losing 2 major contracts. One because of an anonymous tip about fraudulent billing, the other because his partner had suddenly been charged with tax evasion. Both tips had come from the same anonymous email account. Mine. "I can imagine," I said, feigning sympathy. "What happened?" He waved a hand dismissively. "A few people didn't appreciate the way I do business. Jealousy. You know how it is." Oh, I knew exactly how it was. I knew about the offshore accounts Marissa had helped me trace, the shell companies I'd quietly exposed, the government auditor now circling like a shark. But I let him keep talking, basking in his delusion. The second step in my plan was simple. Give him hope. Nothing makes a downfall more satisfying than letting the target believe they're climbing out, right before you cut the rope. "Jason," I said softly, leaning forward, "if I do this, I want to know it'll make a difference, that you won't just waste it." He placed a hand over his chest like a politician swearing an oath. "You have my word. I've learned from my mistakes." Lies. I could see it in his eyes. He was already thinking of how to turn my inheritance into another scheme. But I didn't call him out. I didn't even flinch. I let him believe I was buying it. Later that week, I visited Marissa in her cramped apartment. The blinds were drawn, her laptop open on the coffee table, screen glowing with files that could ruin Jason 10 times over. She looked up at me with that sly smile I'd grown to appreciate. "How's our favorite narcissist?" she asked. "Desperate," I replied. "Perfect timing." Marissa turned the laptop so I could see. "The auditors are moving fast, but if you want him humiliated, not just bankrupt, we should wait until he's in the middle of rebuilding. That way, when we pull the last thread, everything unravels." I finished. She nodded. Exactly. That was step 3. Time the final strike so he'd lose not just his money, but his pride. I wanted him to taste victory before choking on it. Jason called me 3 days later. "Elena, I've got a meeting with some potential investors next week. If you could transfer the inheritance before then." His voice was oozing fake gratitude. But beneath it, I heard the urgency. He wasn't just low on funds. He was drowning. And the investors? Probably his last lifeline. I made my voice small, hesitant. I'll think about it, Jason. It's a lot to give up. He sighed dramatically, as if I were the selfish one here. Elena, I'm your family. I've always looked out for you. That almost broke my composure. Looked out for me? He'd looked down on me my whole life, grinding me into the dirt any chance he got. But instead of lashing out, I gave him the sweetest, most convincing "I'll try" I could muster. Because step 4 was about to begin, and it would make everything before it looked like child's play. Jason's big investor meeting fell on a Thursday. I knew because he wouldn't stop reminding me. Each call dripping with fake warmth, each text dressed up as brotherly concern. I played along, pretending I was wrestling with the decision, letting him think every smile and "we'll see" was a crack in my resolve. In reality, my plan was already in motion. Marissa and I had chosen that exact day for the final strike. The timing wasn't just poetic, it was surgical. Jason needed to be standing at the top of his imaginary comeback when we yanked the ground out from under him. The morning of the meeting, I walked into the same cafe where we'd met weeks before. Jason was there already, wearing a suit so sharp it could cut glass, his hair slicked back, a cologne cloud announcing his desperation. He looked like success, if you didn't know the termites eating away at the foundation. "Elena," he said, standing to greet me. "You look incredible. I'm so glad you came." I set my purse on the table, offering a faint smile. "I wanted to see you before your meeting. Dad says this could be a turning point for you." "It will be," he said, his eyes gleaming. "With your help, it's all going to fall into place." I tilted my head. "So, you're sure you can turn it around?" He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Absolutely. And when I do, I'll make sure you're taken care of. Always." That almost made me laugh. Jason, taking care of me, was like a fox promising to watch the henhouse. I slid an envelope across the table. He stared at it, eyes widening slightly, then ripped it open. Inside was a check for the full amount of my inheritance. "Elena," he breathed, looking up at me like I just handed him a lifeline. "I knew you wouldn't let me down." "I'd never dream of it," I said softly. What he didn't know was that the account the check was drawn from was already flagged for investigation. The moment he deposited it, a web of financial alerts would trigger. Alerts I'd quietly set up with the help of a very motivated forensic accountant. That afternoon, while Jason was in his meeting, the chain reaction began. His personal and business accounts were frozen simultaneously. Halfway through his pitch, his phone started vibrating nonstop. Calls from his lawyer, his bank, and his now furious partners. And then came the final blow. Marissa, dressed in an elegant navy blazer, walked into the investors' conference room carrying a neat stack of printed reports. She didn't look at Jason as she set them on the table. "You may want to see this before making any commitments," she told the investors. Pages of documented fraud, shell companies, and falsified contracts. Every dirty secret Jason thought was buried. The room went silent. One investor pushed back his chair. Another slid the report toward himself, frowning deeply. Jason's confident grin was gone, replaced by a colorless, tight-lipped panic. "Elena, I can explain," he started, but I was already walking toward the door. I paused in the doorway, meeting his eyes for the first time that day. "Funny thing, Jason," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. "You made my childhood hell, and I just returned the favor." I left him standing there in front of a table of stone-faced investors, the sound of his phone still buzzing like a dying wasp. By the time the sun set, Jason's name was trending online, for all the wrong reasons. His accounts were empty, his reputation radioactive, and his fresh start nothing but ash. And me? I didn't lose a cent. If you loved watching justice served and want more jaw-dropping stories of betrayal and revenge, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next confession, It's even darker, even juicier, and just as satisfying.